Hey, what's going on, creatives? First quarter of 2025. A lot of new development, and a lot of it stems from competition. So, competition is good, but some of it is just some companies are just kind of methodically moving along here and doing some things. And so, let's kind of get into this and I want to start with Google because Google has been getting crushed for a long time for being so slow and so careful. I think Anthropic is kind of like that. They're not releasing tools as much as other companies, but uh, this model here, the Gemini 2.0 Flash experimental, it allows you to generate images, but it allows you to edit images. And so I uploaded this image, and the next prompt was put a tiger in it. And it placed the tiger in the image. And then I said, okay, now make it look like a sunset. And of course, it made it look like a sunset. Now, here's the deal. We look at this image. This is not great composition. This is not great coloring. It's not great, right? It looks kind of like a first 2 or 3 month person trying to do a photo manipulation in Photoshop. That's what it looks like because nothing is blended. The tree, the lighting, no shadows on the tiger. There's nothing here. This all looks off. But it's experimental and it's interesting. So this is one of those tools that it's not ready for production. This isn't ready. I think they can stay in the race because the VO2 video model is very good. It's probably their best thing. And even if we go over to the next thing that you can do in AI Studio. So if you guys are not familiar with AI Studio, this is Google AI Studio. This is where you can kind of get your API keys and everything. So if we come over here, you can get the code on how it works. You can get an API key. I have an API key. So there's some things here that really is useful in Google API. Because another thing we can do, and we don't have many models that can do this, but I always figured Google should be able to do this. So I put a link to my model, and this is the Gemini 1.5 Pro model. So the Gemini 1.5 Pro model, you can put a link to YouTube, and I said, turn this video into a training manual. And it went through, and you can see I'm only using 237 tokens out of 2 million. And it kind of gave me this, very vanilla, should have been better. However, I reprompted it, and I asked, can it be more detailed? And it went through, and I got some more details on this video. Now, still not good enough. I don't know if you can actually get the transcript. Let me see. I think if you can get the transcript, I think you can do a lot more with what I'm trying to do here is get the transcript, turn it into a training model, and maybe even get the transcript and turn it into a blog post. Now, Gemini doesn't write that well, so I may have to turn it over to Claude and have it write it, but the first time through, maybe we can get it. And so yeah, it's going to generate the transcript. Let's come back to this and see what it does. We'll come back to this because I want to go to the next thing that Google has. And outside of the VO2, this Notebook LM is the most popular tool that Google has. This is a fabulous tool. And if you come through, I do a couple of things. One, I write a blog post. This is my blog post, and I just turned it into a podcast. So I wrote it, and then I just come over here and I can just turn it into a podcast. So we'll watch that load up here for a second. And the other thing that we can do, and this is coming back to...
All right, so welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today, we're going to be exploring a topic that's honestly really crucial, but often kind of overlooked. We're talking about the representation of African Americans in, well, both the tech world and, believe it or not, skilled trades.
Interesting combination.
Yeah, so this is something I've been dealing with for a long time here. It's a subject that's close to my heart when it comes to Black people in tech and in trades, in human workforce development in general. So I will put a link to this podcast and to the article in the comments if you're interested in stuff like that. But I am, and you can see here, so I have that and another one, Agency Over Ethics. This is, again, another podcast that I wrote. And I think one of the things, deep research is one of those things where you go to deep research, you get all of that material, then you come over here to the Notebook LM and turn it into a podcast. It allows you to take in that research in two different mediums. You can read it, and then on the drive to work, or on the train, you can listen to the podcast of your research. And I think this is a good way of taking in all of this information that we now have access to and being able to contextualize it and absorb it the way we want. And I think that's important because outside of videos, podcasts, this tool here, along with deep research, a great tool. It is my favorite tool from Google. I just happen to love this one. All right. So you can see we have the full transcript here. And I think, let me see, how long was this video? Make sure we got all 13 minutes of it. Let's check this out.
Really just making you less effective. This is how to balance.
What's going on, creatives? So I spent the last 13 minutes. Okay, yeah. So it got this, and let's now this doesn't have my writing style, so I don't know how it's going to turn out. But you can see with Google, we can do some interesting things in this Gen AI studio and with Notebook LM. And so I think Google is doing some interesting things. I think Google is worth watching and really engaging in their products. And I think that's something that I'm really enjoying working with Google, because I use the Google API as well. But obviously, Google is definitely part of that mix. All right. Next, let's talk about OpenAI. And I'm going to go to the playground. Now, this is probably one of those things where you would think I would go to deep research, but because I do some development stuff, I'm going to go into the API. First of all, let's talk about GPT 4.5. It's okay. It's an okay model. I'm not sure what they were doing with this one. It's a preview model. I'm guessing they are working on writing, because they said they're doing some stuff with fictional writing and creative writing. So I imagine this is the first step towards that. But what really stands out for me, if we go to the API, the two things that stand out for me is Responses API. This here is what I find interesting. This is good because if you use chat completions, it's kind of convoluted sometimes. This is so much easier. And the fact that you now have tools right in here so you can do the search It comes with tools. You can do search. You can do operator, although operator is not that very good. You can do structured outputs, which is one of those things. If you really want to deal with agents, I think you need to spend some time looking at structured outputs. And so I just believe you need to spend some time looking at structured outputs if you're going to start dealing with agents, because it's not talked about a lot, but this is how I'm able to do a lot of what I do with OpenAI. And I'm using the OpenAI assistants, but Responses API will replace the assistance API in the future. So I believe in 2026 they're going to deprecate it. So Responses API, if you're doing anything with development with models, learn this one. The other interesting thing I think that they did was, and I still have to play around with it, but you can see we have the assistants, but the real-time API. Okay, so the next thing that I think is interesting coming out of OpenAI is Agent SDK. So I still have some work to do with this, but I've done a couple of things with it, and I'm finding that I think I could probably build agents with this. But here's what I feel about agents. I'm not 100% sold on agents yet. I'm sold on automated workflows, but not so much on agents. And the reason why is because I've tried a few in the process of things I need to do, and it's just not accurate enough. The LLM by itself is not accurate enough for me right now to be an agent. And I think with that 3 to 5%, 10% failure rate, it's just not good for what I needed to do. So, but I think this structure is good because right now everyone is using N8N, Make.com, LangGraph, LangChain, LangFlow, Pydantic AI. So there are all of these different frameworks, but I think what has to happen is that we need to come up with something that's simple. And I know everyone's talking about MCPs right now, which is a model protocol. I guess it's some type of standard that Anthropic has to have standards of how agents get called. But I think we're a long way away. And a long way in this era, I'm not even sure what that means anymore. It could be 4 months and we figure it out, or it can be a couple of years. So I'm not sure. But this is interesting right here. I think this is something to look at. And I think the other thing to look at with where is my reel? Okay, so the next thing, the real-time API with the WebRTC. Now, I'm not going to go into the details with this, but I will tell you this. I've had an easier time implementing real-time API with this, mainly with the voice. I had a much easier time implementing this than I did with the previous version. I could not get that to work unless I used kind of like a third-party structure to kind of route it through. But this was easy. So I'm going to have to do some videos on all of this stuff in OpenAI's API because I don't want to get to the details with this. But I think this is interesting if you're trying to build apps, if you're trying to integrate AI into other tools. I think what OpenAI is doing in the background for developers, I think is interesting. So this to me is, it doesn't get talked about because it's not, I guess, consumer facing, but trust me on this, what OpenAI is doing for developers is going to seep over into that consumer facing side products. All right, next tool number 3, Manus. Let's talk about Manus. And let's go back over here. Let's see what we did here. Okay, so here's the blog. Gemini is not really good at writing blog posts, so I didn't expect much. But let's go to Manus. Okay, Manus, I do have access to it. I tried something this morning just to see, ran this. It did okay. I have to play around with this some more. So I'm going to put Manus as one of those tools that I just need to work with this a little bit more. And I need to find some more use cases because it timed out on me when I tried to do some other things. Like these 3 never ran. And this one ran this morning, but if I were to do this in OpenAI's deep research, I think I would have gotten more out of this. So it's okay, but I have to give it a fair shot. I have to spend more time with it. So Manus is something I'm going to come back to. Okay. Same thing I think with DeepSeek. Yeah. So the same thing I think with DeepSeek. Now, here's the issue with DeepSeek. Okay. I can't show you DeepSeek because I'm on my company's laptop and they have it blocked. So I can't use it. And I can't download it. So I haven't been able to play with it. But let's talk about DeepSeek from a theoretical of like, what do we think is happening here? As far as the hype is concerned, you can see that no one's really talking about DeepSeek anymore. And I think it's because what they did was, again, it was interesting, it was new, and there were some revolutions there. However, it's a Chinese model, and, you know, for U.S. companies, are you going to allow your employees access to that model and upload it, even if you download the model and use it locally? Are you going to allow that? So I think DeepSeek is going to have an issue where, yes, it can work for consumers again, but enterprise level in the US, probably in Europe as well, it's going to have a rough time. It's going to have a rough go at it. But it's going to be interesting to see what US companies take DeepSeek's research and duplicate that research. So I think that's where they made a big impact. I think Manus probably is making the same impact on the way they did their autonomous agent. So I think what China is doing is interesting, pushing the envelope, and I think they're giving the West a run for their money for one thing, but I also think you're realizing this, like, you can take all of that exists already and start building on it and build interesting things and build things that people can use and products that people can use right now. So I think that's where DeepSeek and Manus have come into play. Another one that came out, Grok, was a big one. Now, I don't use X. So for me, when I'm using Grok over here, I thought it's cool. I think Grok is cool. I think Grok if there's a model out there outside of Anthropic or OpenAI, I think Grok is the model that I think that's the one that you have to watch. They need an API. And I don't know if Grok has an API yet, but it needs an API. But I think of all models out there, I think Grok is the interesting one that will have an opportunity to get some play. Whereas I think when you're talking about video games, AI in video games, AI in movies, anything that allows for a little more spicy LLM, I think those arenas is where Grok is going to really play. So I think Grok is one of those things that we just need to watch. You know, I play around with it. I'm not on X, so I think X is where Grok really shows because it has access to all the data in X. So I think that's probably where Grok is at its best. But without the API, we'll have to see. But I think as soon as they get an API, I think Grok is going to do a lot for developers simply because it's just less censored. All right. Couple other things. Vibe coding. Let's talk about vibe coding. And because I vibe code all the time. Okay. Let's go through here. This is me vibe coding. This is me working with this LLM to get some code to work. And the way I do this, so you can see I have a GitHub. So I start building it. I build it in, I think this was Lovable. So I build it in Lovable for the front facing, and then I bring it over here to work on the back end. All right. So what do I think of vibe coding? I will be honest with you. I don't know. I'm just not feeling it. I'm not feeling it as a term because the amount of work it takes for me to get this, to get Claude, and Claude is the best coder, and Claude struggled with the implementation of an S3 bucket. It struggled with it. Okay. And I went back and forth with it because I have code that works for an S3 bucket. I gave it the code and just said, try to implement it into what we already have. And it struggled. So I think the vibe coding is kind of one of those things where, yeah, I guess if you're trying to do something simple, front end type stuff and not much on the back end, yeah, you can vibe code. But I don't know. I don't know. You guys have, well, this is one of those, let's put this on the watch this space ladder. So let's put it on watch this space. I want to see if vibe coding actually takes off, if that's actually something that really, really happens. And that brings me to the final take here. The final take, let's talk about AI agents. I think I mentioned this earlier, but I've been cautious on talking about agents simply because of this. The amount, when I look, and let me go to, so you go to N8N and you get all of these cool looking graphics, right? Oh, look at this workflow. It's so interesting, so pretty. Wow, this thing can do so much and everything. Question is, if I put that out in the world, is this thing going to actually work? And what happens if I need to troubleshoot this? Because look at all of this. And I got this one agent deciding to do all of these things. Really? And I hand this code over to someone else. Will they know what's going on? I'm not sure about this. So I think workflows are great. And in fact, I think this guy here, I think he does one of the best jobs in talking about this when it comes to agents. But I think N8N and Make.com and LangChain and LangFlow, I'm totally not convinced that those are the answers to agentic AI. I'm not convinced they are, because I look at this and I wonder, can I peel behind the curtains of this and troubleshoot this? And can I hand it off to any other developer and they understand the nuances of this if it breaks? And these LLMs and these agents, they break. And so, and then I don't know how you take this and incorporate it into a business infrastructure, right? Is this all just, again, it's a chatbot? I don't know. So I'm not convinced about the agents yet until I can see it. I think what Manus has showed us, I think that's closer to how people are going to use AI agents. But for businesses, I don't think for businesses and for enterprise, the chat feature is the way to go. I think it has to get incorporated more so in the actual applications. So that's just my opinion. But I think it's another space where I don't know, because when I say it may take a while, I don't know what a while is in this era. So a while just may be 3 or 4 months and OpenAI brings out something, or Anthropic brings out something, and there it is. Okay. Final thing here, if we go to Claude is one of my tools. I just have a lot of projects. So I love the projects, comic book makers, case studies, and everything like that. I love the projects. I'm let's see, if I start a new chat, I do like this. Now, I know some people don't like this. I love the GitHub, and I love the Google Drive, and even the style. So I have a text storyteller, straight talk coach, and then we have the ones here. So I've kind of created a couple of styles. I do like the Sonnet extended, that thinking model. I'm still a big fan of 3.5 though. To be perfectly honest with you, I'm still a big fan of 3.5. And because I think 3.7 is a bit verbose when it comes to coding. And I think all of these models are a bit verbose when it comes to coding. So it's just one of those things. So, all right. I got a lot to say. I haven't even talked about Bolt and Lovable. I got a lot to say about those. So I may come up with another one. So right now I'm just kind of ranting. I got some projects coming up that I'm going to show you guys. But I just wanted to kind of talk about what I've seen so far this year and kind of the things that are interesting me. I think that's really what this kind of rant is about, are the things I'm finding interesting and that I'm looking at and in this AI space. And I'm not the hype guy, so it's why you don't see a lot of videos every time something new comes out that I post a video. I'm not that guy. I'm the guy that sits back and say, let it cook for a little bit. Let's put it in the stew. Let's put it in the pot, let it stew, and then see what comes out on the other end. So I'm that guy. So while everyone is like, oh, this thing is great, this is a killer, I'm not that guy. I'm the guy who just sits and stews and thinks about this and figures out, how can I make it work for me, or does it work for me? Okay, so that's me. All right, so that's it. I will see you guys on the other end.